I mean, it's cute she calls herself CEO. My brother chuckled across the table, waving his wine glass. But we all know she's just playing office while the rest of us build real companies. The laughter that followed was soft, hesitant. Mom looked away. Dad forced a tight smile. I sat still, slicing my lamb in silence while my hand trembled slightly beneath the linen napkin. My name is Jessica Lane. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever sat at a family table and realized you were never one of them? They loved to humiliate me during these dinners. They called it banter, but it always felt like a knife disguised as a joke. I had spent the last 4 years building my startup. Late nights, sleepless weekends, investor rejections, code breaking at 3 a.m. My brother Ryan, he walked into a venture-backed company straight out of grad school and thought that made him God. He always mocked my team. Said we were a cute side hustle. I ignored it. Mostly. But that Easter dinner, something changed. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. Like I was an insect crawling on his boot. Like I should apologize for even trying. Then came the sip. Grandma, in her floral blouse and soft pearls, raised her teacup slowly. She was 78, sharp as ever and always quiet during the chaos. But not this time. Strange, she said, setting the cup down gently. Coming from someone who just got fired, after her company bought yours. Ryan blinked. The air turned thick. Someone coughed. His fiancée dropped her fork. I'm sorry, Grandma continued. Was that not public yet? Ryan's face went pale. He turned to me. What did you do? I met his eyes. Smiled. And for the first time in years I felt the weight shift. They had laughed for too long. Tonight silence was mine. You could hear a pin drop. Dad shifted in his seat. Mom's fork clinked awkwardly against her plate. Ryan just sat there, stunned, mouth half open like he forgot how to breathe. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The room was finally doing what I had begged it to do for years. Listen. Jessica, my mom said carefully, like she was stepping across broken glass. What does your grandmother mean by bought? I wiped my mouth gently with the napkin, folded it and placed it beside my plate. I mean exactly what she said, I replied. My company acquired Ryan's last week. The deal closed on Tuesday. Ryan snapped. You bought us. With what money? Your cute app barely had legs a year ago. My cute app now powers 3,700 private practice clinics across the country, I said. We're profitable. And we were liquid enough to buy your struggling AI firm for $6.2 million. Your board took the deal in less than 24 hours. His fiancée Carly turned to him. You told me you left for something better. He didn't answer. Couldn't. That's when Grandma laughed. Not a loud laugh. Just a breathy, knowing one. The kind only old women who've seen decades of family drama can do right. Ryan, you always thought noise was the same thing as movement, she said. Jessica moved in silence. And now look. I wasn't always silent. There was a time I tried so hard to prove myself, to explain my vision to my parents, to get Ryan to respect me, to be seen as the woman who wasn't just the family's failed artist turned tech hopeful. They never saw it. When I raced my first seed round, Mom said, "That's nice, honey. But don't quit your daydream." When I hit my first million in AR, Dad said, "Well, revenue's not profit." When I won a startup pitch in San Francisco, Ryan said, "That's not real money. That's startup fairy dust." So I stopped showing them. I poured every doubt, every laugh, every backhanded compliment into code, strategy, and relentless execution. They didn't know what I was building. Until it stood over them. But here's the thing about revenge that no one talks about. When it finally happens, it doesn't scream. It whispers. And that night at our family's Easter dinner, the whisper was loud enough to shatter years of silence. I stood to get some air, and as I walked past Ryan's chair, I leaned down just for him. Next time you laugh, I whispered, make sure you're not on someone else's payroll. He looked up at me, red-faced, humiliated, small. He finally looked like how they made me feel for years. And it wasn't even the best part yet. Because I hadn't told him the real reason I bought his company. That reveal was still coming. 3 days before that dinner, I sat in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking the bay, the scent of eucalyptus trees drifting in from the open patio doors. Across from me sat Richard Levine, the weary-eyed CTO of my brother's company, Silverpine AI. He pushed a file across the table. Here's everything, he said. Financials. Boom. And, Jessica, full disclosure, Ryan hasn't written a single line of code in over 8 months. We've been doing triage. Burning cash. The guy's a ghost. I opened the folder and smiled, not surprised. Ryan always had 2 talents: speaking well in investor meetings and taking credit for other people's work. I used to admire it, how he could make people believe he was a visionary. But when I saw their burn rate and bloated org chart, I realized he wasn't a visionary. He was a very expensive mirage. So what's the play? Richard asked. I looked up calm. We buy it. Strip what's worth saving. Let the rest go. Richard leaned back, and for a moment I thought I saw respect flicker in his eyes. I didn't always move like this. I didn't always know how. Back when I was just an overworked product manager begging for a promotion at my first job, Ryan was already being invited to panels. Dad called him a prodigy. Mom said, he's just a natural-born leader. I remember watching them toast him with champagne while I heated my leftovers in the microwave after another 13-hour day. But here's what no one tells you about being underestimated. It becomes rocket fuel. After I left my job, I took every dime I had, $27 for 100, and built my MVP. I lived on ramen and couch surfed with old college friends. I got rejected 42 times by investors. 42. But the 43rd said yes. No. I was buying out my brother's revolutionary company for pennies on the dollar. Back at the dinner table, Carly, the fiancée, still looked like someone had splashed her face with cold water. Wait, if she owns the company now, does that mean? She turned to Ryan. Yes, I said before he could lie. I'm your boss now. I watched her eyes do the math. The ring on her finger suddenly didn't sparkle quite as bright. Mom finally snapped. Why would you do this, Jessica? Why humiliate him? I turned to her. You know, when I landed my first $500,000 client, I called you to celebrate. You told me not to rub it in Ryan's face. But he gets to laugh at me over mashed potatoes. No one spoke. I didn't do this to humiliate him, I said. I did it to survive. You all taught me that love here is conditional on status. So I built mine. Brick by brick. Then I turned to Ryan. And I'm not done. Because what I hadn't told anyone, not even Grandma, was what else we found inside that company. A secret that was going to change everything. The secret came wrapped in a PDF labeled, Internal Client Notes, Confidential. I was skimming through Silverpine's cloud folders the day after acquisition, running audits with my legal team. Honestly, I was just looking for anything that smelled like liability. Then I found that file. At first glance it looked routine, just onboarding notes, call summaries. But one section had a bright red flag. Client, Salix Pharma, AI Contract Modification Proposal. Assigned lead, Ryan Harper. I clicked. And what I read made my stomach twist. It was a memo, drafted by Ryan, suggesting an algorithm tweak that would intentionally skew risk assessments for low-income patients, pushing them into a manual review queue. Translation: delaying access to critical medications under the guise of optimization. It wasn't just unethical. It was illegal. And he'd done it for profit. Salix Pharma had offered a back-end incentive if Silverpine could reduce their payer risk exposure. Ryan framed it as a smart partnership. But what he was really doing was building a digital moat between poor patients and life-saving drugs. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. This wasn't just a case of family betrayal or startup ego. This was people's lives. I leaned back in my chair, my throat dry. Download everything, I told my counsel. We're blowing this wide open. Back at home, I sat on the couch that night while my son Micah played piano in the next room. 17, full of kindness, all heart and curiosity. He didn't know how messy adults could be. I wanted to keep it that way. For a little longer. But I also knew, this was the moment I'd been waiting for. The opportunity to not just win, but correct. That's when the plan clicked. I didn't go to the SE. I didn't go to the media. I went to someone else. A woman named Ava Walters, patient rights attorney, part-time bulldog, full-time moral compass. She took one look at the file and said, "Let me handle it." 2 days later, on Easter Sunday, while Ryan was still processing the fact that he worked for me, Ava showed up at the tail end of dinner. She wore black, carried a manila envelope, and didn't even knock. Just walked right through the front door like she'd been summoned by karma herself. "I have a delivery for Mr. Ryan Harper," she said calmly. He took the envelope, brows scrunched, and tore it open at the table. He scanned the first page, then the second. By page 3 he went pale. What is this?" he stammered. Ava smiled. "That's a formal cease and desist. And a notice of investigation for AI bias and medical fraud." Mom dropped her wine glass. Dad shot up from his seat. Grandma didn't flinch. Carly's mouth hung open. Me? I just reached for another biscuit. See, revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes, it arrives in quiet papers, cold ink, and the kind of silence that hums like a reckoning. And it was only the beginning. Because what Ryan didn't know was that the investigation would soon uncover another lie. One that would bring the entire house of cards collapsing. Ryan didn't show up to work the next morning. Not that I expected him to. By noon, Ava had forwarded me a response from his lawyer. Some blustering denial with just enough desperation baked into the language to show they were scared. I was good. Fear makes people sloppy. I sat at my desk, tapping my pen against the edge, staring at the login portal for Silverpine's internal messaging system. It was there I found the second lie. An archived Slack thread. Dated 2 months before the acquisition. Ryan had messaged a junior engineer at 1:42 a.m. "Hey, delete the commit history from that patch we pushed for Salix. Scrub the logs. If anyone asks, we never ran that version in production." The engineer pushed back. "Isn't that illegal?" Ryan never replied. But the next morning the logs were gone. I printed the screenshots and added them to the file. No more gray areas now. This wasn't just a questionable partnership. It was deliberate fraud and data tampering. And I had him cornered. But I wasn't finished. I called a full company town hall. Our team, many of whom used to work for Ryan, gathered in the main conference room. I stood in front, heart steady, voice sharp. "I know things have moved quickly," I said, "but there's something you all deserve to know." I laid it out, what we found, what we were doing, and most importantly what we stood for. We will not build software that hurts people. I won't ask anyone here to compromise their ethics. If you want out, I understand. But if you stay, we're cleaning house. And we're building something better. The room was quiet. Then a hand went up. It was Lucia, one of Ryan's former engineers. She looked around, then back at me. "I thought we'd never get to say that out loud," she said. Applause followed. Real, genuine. I swallowed hard. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was pretending to lead. I was the leader. Later that day, Ava called. "Jess," she said, "you may want to sit down." I did. "They're freezing Ryan's assets. The investigation's expanding. But there's more. Salix has been subpoenaed. If they turn on him, which they will, he's looking at criminal charges." I didn't speak for a moment. Not out of shock. Out of gravity. All those years they laughed at me. Brushed off my ideas. Labeled me difficult. Told me to smile more. All the while, I was quietly learning how to win. But the true twist hadn't landed yet. That came when I got a text from Carly. "Can we talk?" And what she told me made everything unravel in a way I never saw coming. Because my brother's betrayal didn't start with Silverpine. It started way before. And it had my name on it. I met Carly at the coffee shop near my office. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles, red eyes, and a nervous energy I hadn't seen in her since we were kids. She didn't even order anything. She just sat down, exhaled shakily, and said, "I should have told you years ago." "What are you talking about?" She pulled out her phone, tapped around, and slid it toward me. It was an email. Dated 6 years ago. From me, or at least it had my name on it. Except I never sent it. It was addressed to the venture capital firm we'd both pitched during the early days of our startups. The email declined their funding offer. "Thank you for the interest, but I've decided to pass. I don't believe our philosophies align." Professional. Polite. Final. But I never wrote it. I stared at Carly, heart pounding. "I told Ryan about the offer before you even saw the email. I thought it was harmless," she said, tears brimming. "He asked me to forward him the details so he could vet them. I didn't realize what he was doing until months later. He forged that decline from your account. Then he pitched them his platform 2 weeks later and got the funding." I felt sick. He'd cut me off at the knees before I even got my shot. Not because my idea wasn't good enough, but because he wasn't good enough to compete. "I confronted him after I figured it out," Carly whispered. He said if I ever told you he'd destroy me. He could. I was newly divorced, broke, living with mom and dad. I didn't have the fight in me. I looked away. My hands were trembling under the table. I didn't come to excuse it, she added quickly. I came because it's time someone told you the truth. I nodded slow and tight. And in that moment the final piece of my plan came together. You see, I'd already destroyed Ryan's reputation in the business world. I'd already exposed him legally. But this was personal. He didn't just steal funding. He stole years. He stole possibility. So I called Ava again. I asked what would happen if we added corporate sabotage and identity falsification to the list of offenses. She was quiet for a beat, then said, "We'd need hard proof." And I had just the thing, Ryan's old laptop. My son had found it in Grandma's attic while helping her clean. It was locked. But Micah was 17 and smarter than half the engineers I knew. He cracked it in 10 minutes flat. Inside, everything. The forged email draft. Metadata with Ryan's name on the edits. Even a voice memo to himself, practicing how he'd deny it if I ever found out. I sent it all to Ava. Then I scheduled a press release. Silverpine founder under investigation for medical fraud, data tampering and corporate sabotage. Victim CO speaks out. And I did speak. On record. On camera. Clear. They tried to erase me. Now I was the one writing the story. But the real climax didn't come until the following week. At the reading of Grandma's will. Where Ryan expected to inherit the family trust. What he got instead was a room full of silence, and a single letter. We all sat in Grandma's lawyer's office. Mahogany walls, shelves lined with dusty leather books, a grandfather clock ticking like it was counting down something tragic. Ryan walked in late, of course, wearing a smug smile and a tailored blazer he definitely couldn't afford anymore. He dropped into the chair next to mine like nothing was wrong. "You know, Jess," he said, "no matter how much noise you make, I'll still be the golden child in her eyes." I didn't respond. Because what was about to happen would speak louder than anything I could say. Mr. Callahan, the attorney, cleared his throat. "I'll begin," he said. Margaret Evelyn Green's final wishes were written 3 months ago, in full capacity and witnessed by 2 neutral parties. He opened the folder. "In the event of my passing, I leave the Green Family Trust, valued at $1.7 million, to..." Ryan straightened in his seat. "Jessica N. Green." The room inhaled. Only Ryan exhaled, a laugh brittle and high-pitched. "What? That's got to be a mistake." Callahan raised his eyes slowly. "She left a note. Handwritten. Would you like me to read it?" I nodded once. He pulled out a folded piece of lined paper, yellowed at the edges. "Jess, they underestimated you because you spoke softly. But I watched you. While they chased noise, you built something with grace. You never needed my money, but now I want you to have it because I know you'll use it wisely." As for Ryan, he already had enough of everything. He just never knew how to keep it. Ryan stood up. "Are you kidding me? After everything I did for her?" "Sit down," Callahan said firmly. "We're not done." Ryan froze, fuming. Callahan continued, "There is one final item. A sealed envelope hand-delivered to your parents' house 2 days ago. Addressed to the entire family." Everyone looked at me. Because I was the one who had delivered it. Callahan opened a copy. Inside was a printed image, grainy but clear. Ryan's forged email. The timestamp. The metadata showing his edits. A second page showed the text from the junior engineer about scrubbing the logs. Then a third. My own sworn statement notarized and witnessed. Every secret he'd hidden was now open like a wound. My mother's face drained of color. My father looked at Ryan like he didn't recognize him. And Carly, bless her, took my hand under the table and squeezed. Ryan stood there, eyes wild, lips parted, searching for some foothold. But there was nothing left to climb. "You ruined me," he hissed at me as I stood to leave. I looked at him one last time. "No, Ryan. You did that all by yourself." As I walked out, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. The years of quiet hurt, the silent dismissals, the little jabs and sideways laughs, they had finally unspooled from my chest. But there was still one thing left to do. To end it, not with vengeance but with clarity. And that came in a letter of my own. The letter I wrote wasn't for revenge. It was for truth. 3 pages typed. Delivered the day after Grandma's estate was settled. I mailed one to my parents, one to Ryan, and I kept one for myself, to remind me that silence too can hold power, until it doesn't. It started like this. You told me I was just playing CEO. You told me I was dreaming too big, reaching too far. But it was never the job I wanted to prove. It was that I existed fully in this family. And now I finally understand, you never had to believe in me. Because I believed in myself. I told them everything. How I'd known Ryan was behind the investor sabotage. How I found the old emails, the erased code entries, the frantic text to an intern begging him to cover the trail. How I pieced it together while everyone was too busy mocking me for my small-time tech. I told them about Grandma's call 2 weeks before she passed. How she asked me quietly, "Do you still want them to see you?" And how I answered, "No. I want to see myself." That was the moment everything shifted. That was the moment she changed her will. And the moment I stopped asking for their approval. After the letter went out, I didn't expect replies. And I didn't get any. But I heard about what happened after. Ryan's new project collapsed within a month. The venture capital firm he was pitching to had read the leaked documents from his firing. He was blacklisted, not publicly, just enough that no one took his meetings anymore. Dad lost a chunk of his retirement trying to cover Ryan's debts. Mom tried to sell the lake house to stay afloat, only to find out Grandma had quietly transferred the deed to me. I donated it. Turned it into a women in tech retreat center. Carly moved in with me. We co-founded a scholarship together, for girls who were told their dreams were too loud. And I stood on the stage of a national conference 6 months later, thousands in the audience, wearing a navy blue suit and a smile not built for revenge, but for peace. I started my keynote with a line I never thought I'd have the courage to say. I was underestimated by people I loved. But sometimes silence isn't humility. Sometimes silence is survival. They clapped. But more than that, I felt heard. Finally heard. So if you're watching this, and your brother calls you a joke at Easter dinner, if your parents look past you like your worth is some shadow behind someone else's shine, don't fight them. Build without them. Let your success be the volume they never let you speak with. Because one day they'll sip their tea and realize you were the empire they couldn't see.